Welcome to another episode of Talking Backstage. I'm your host, Tom Lund. Today's guest is someone I've known since high school, Brianna Mowry. Brianna is the band and choral teacher at Sierra Vista Junior High School. As the band and choral teacher, she teaches her students music theory, performance techniques, and directs their performances. In this episode, Brianna shares with us some stories of her time as a student at Saugus High School, as well as the importance of arts education in our community. Hi, Brianna. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So first question, what schools did you attend in Santa Clarita?
So I was practically born and raised here. I went to Bouquet Canyon Elementary, which no longer exists, which is kind of funny.
Oh, that's right.
Arroyo Seco Junior High School, and I graduated from Saugus High School in 2006.
Fantastic. And then did you do any classes at COC too?
Yeah, I did 2 years at COC and transferred to Cal State University, Northridge.
Fantastic. So how old were you? What grade were you in when you first started getting involved with the arts?
I would say that 8th grade was probably my first real introduction to the arts in school. When I was in elementary school, I did piano lessons for a little while. And then when I hit junior high, it was like too hard for me to juggle new school and lessons and practicing. And so I kind of put that aside. And a dear family friend of mine kind of coerced me into joining theater when I was in 8th grade. And so my first ever production was of Oklahoma. And I didn't have a role with a name that I can remember. I just know I had a lot of solos. So I thought like, oh, maybe I can sing.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So then once you got into high school, were you involved with the arts there?
Oh, absolutely. That same family friend, shout out to PJ Bobby, said that if he was going to audition for choir, that I had to do it too. And so I was like, sure, I like singing, I'll do that. So I was in concert choir at Saugus High School from freshman through senior year. I did a year of jazz choir, and I did probably 2 years or 2.5 years of theater.
Yeah. So tell me about your experience with choir, because that's where we met, obviously, was choir at Saugus when your freshman year. Do you remember how many freshmen were admitted to concert choir that year?
I think it was just 3 of us. I know that April, it's so weird to call her April, April Dooley, who's the director. Now that we're adults and we can call each other by our first names, it's so strange. I know that April did not like to take freshmen in choir if she didn't have to. And so I immediately was in this place of like, oh, I have this great responsibility that I'm a freshman in this like elite group. But yeah, there were only 3 of us. And I think one of the 3 didn't stay the whole year, but I know PJ and I stayed the entire time. I think it was easier to be a boy as a freshman than it was to be a girl as a freshman.
What were some of your favorite memories from singing in choir at Saugus?
So I think my favorite part of being in choir was how much we got to travel, and we would go, all over Southern California to these colleges I'd never heard of and I'd never seen. We went to Florida. We went to New York City. We got to go places and see things, which I never really had the chance to do. The range of ages when you're in high school makes it so fun because you get to feel that feeling of like, oh no, we're harmonizing, we're singing together. And it's all these different levels of kids. And I remember Karen Huell sort of like took me under her wing a little bit and was so kind to me and like helped me understand like what choir was like and what it was about. And so I loved that. It was so easy to make friends. And we spent so much time together. Like it was incredible. It felt like every day at lunch, every day after school, plus class time, we were constantly with each other.
Yeah, exactly. So when did you decide that you wanted to go into teaching and specifically teaching music?
I would say that I didn't know. Like it became this thing of, I kind of expressed to my parents that I wanted to be a performer. And they were like, well, you need to have a plan B. And so at the time it was probably like in 10th grade. I was like, I'm going to be a star. And then as I got older and I started working, I had more roles within the choir at school. I felt like actually, I really like helping other students. I was a section leader. I really wanted to teach my fellow section their notes. And I really enjoyed spending that time doing one-on-one work and small group work. And I went like, oh, actually, I kind of like this way more than I like performing.
So once you got to CSUN, tell me a little bit about that. Was that strictly you're going into like a music ed program, or were you going into just like a regular teaching program?
So I auditioned as a vocal performance major because their ed program is incredible. And it's usually harder to get into,
Okay.
whether that's teaching ed, music ed, like any of their ed programs. Like Cal State Northridge is known for putting out great teachers. So when I auditioned as a vocal performance major. And in my first semester, I changed to a music ed major.
Did you have a decision that you wanted to stay within Santa Clarita, or did you want to teach outside of our community? What kept you home, as it were?
I knew from growing up in the Heart District that it was a district that I would want to teach at. And I think
Okay.
that was a huge drive in why I stayed and why I was willing to be a substitute teacher in the Heart District, because that's where I did my sub work. I wanted to get to know people. I wanted to sort of make connections and hear about jobs early and things like that. Like I needed to find a way to get in. And so I stayed locally because we owned a house and we couldn't leave, but also because I knew
Sure.
it was a really good school district and that if I had the opportunity to teach in it, then I wanted to take it.
Walk us through what's a typical day like as a music teacher at a junior high?
I love teaching junior high. The kids are silly. They're excited to be at school. But yeah, so the typical day, when I get to school, probably around 6:45, open that door. I've got kids in my room. They are either getting out their instruments and warming up or practicing or playing, depending upon what class period is first. I have kids in there who are filming TikTok videos. I have kids in there who are just chatting with their friends or eating snacks on the floor. Like it's just kind of a hangout
Yeah.
space until bell rings. And it depends what class I'm teaching. So when the kids come in for band class, they are in the first 5 minutes, they're setting up their instruments, they're tuning, they're warming up. And then we'll do kind of group warm ups and scales, a little bit of theory, and then we'll focus on our music for the remainder of the class period, whether that's like specific sections, polishing whole pieces. Occasionally we'll pull out the percussion section since they tend to have less to do and they tend to not
Sure.
be highlighted as much. And that would be like my advanced band. That might be the pattern of how we go through our class period. For beginning band, it's a lot of I'm not on the podium. I am adjusting posture. I am fixing instruments. I feel like my whole life is repairing lightly broken instruments or telling kids to throw away reeds that are not playable. It's a lot of posture. Like, nope, you got to be sitting up straight, adjusting music stands, things like
I feel
that.
like I
Like,
should be sitting up straight now that you're
I
calling it
even when
out.
I said that, I was like, I should have my shoulders back.
I know, right? We went into our 13 points of posture that we learned.
So when the kids walk in the door, they're already working on their theory. We do a daily written theory exercise. We do sight reading and sight singing. And then we'll do vocal warm-ups and we'll focus on, in that time, producing vowels, really good vowels. And vocal tone at a junior high level is maybe you're in like the baby steps, the baby levels, especially because their voices are cracking, boys and girls, it doesn't matter. Their voices
Yep.
are cracking all over the place. Like, you're basically just trying to strengthen the very, very weak foundation a lot of those kids already have, especially
Right.
if they're not the type of kids to be taking music lessons or voice lessons. And then I have an after school jazz band. And then my advanced band would do after school sectionals once a week where the high schoolers would come down and help out and help the kids learn their
Oh,
more
that's cool.
complicated festival music. Yeah. And honestly, I kind of had to do that. I'm a great musician. I'm a great sight reader, but I haven't had to play a lot of these instruments. And so I talked to the high school director, Stephen Hufford, who's incredible. And I was like, hey, like, do you have seniors who want to be teachers? Do you have kids who are interested in becoming educators that want to run sectionals and they get hours towards their music
Yeah.
honor society? I think it's Tri-M. I'm not, yeah,
Okay.
that sounds right. And so the high schoolers would come and I had a high school assistant and she would come after school and help conduct my class, help run sectionals. Like I want to build this program of helping kids who are seniors and want to be educators come and get an opportunity to have time in front of a class and actually get to teach. And I started it this year a little bit more to kind of figure out what it is I should be doing. And now next year that I have a better idea of that, next year, we'll get to that. But in a few years, maybe kind of turn it into something a little more educational for that senior student where I can
Sure.
actually help them with conducting and gesture and things like that. I really want to do a big and little situation. We talked about it before, but from the high school to the junior high, because not only does it help my kids, it helps them want to stay in band when they go up to the high school. And that's a huge part. I mean, maybe one of the biggest parts of my job is recruitment, getting kids to want to join, getting kids to want to stay in high school, and keeping the program alive, because it gets harder and harder. In junior high, they get one elective.
One of the things that I like that you've said is that, you've got kids in there hanging out and, eating snacks and stuff like that. What have you done to help kind of develop that welcoming part of being a teacher, and especially in the arts? Because I feel like you and I can both talk about this because, we were those kids in high school. We were in the choir room all the time because we felt comfortable. What is it that you think about the arts that is so welcoming? And what is it that you specifically do to try to create that welcoming environment?
So I think it helps that by its nature, your art class is kind of your fun class. Like, it's a little bit less strict in that, like, you're not going to have a state test on your trumpet. And so I think that already brings down the level of like it's a little bit more casual. But even when I was an English teacher, I always had kids in my room. And I think this is going to make me sound like 1,000-year-old, but I try to learn what the kids are doing. So I'm probably half as addicted to TikTok as my kids are. I love it. And here's the thing is when you make the effort to understand what they love, as much as they'll go oh my God, Mrs. Mowry, you like TikTok? They secretly love it, because what'll happen is you'll catch on to the little phrases and things that they use. And when you start to laugh or throw them back, it gives you credit with the kids that oh, she cares about us. She cares about what we like. And I think that's a huge part of it, is that if you want to, you have to be on their level a little bit. And if you're willing to be dorky, if you're willing to learn a dumb dance, that goes a long way in terms of social credit with your students.
Sure. Usually this question is, if you could give yourself or the next generation a piece of advice, but you're already kind of doing that as an educator. That's a big part of what you're doing. So that's why I'm phrasing this specifically to young Brianna. If you could go back in time, hop in the DeLorean and talk to, your younger self, what's a piece of advice that you would give her?
I would say perform more, because I got myself through school, but I had to work the whole time. So I was working full time and I was going to school, which meant that I couldn't do the opera production. I couldn't be in the musical theater. I couldn't do any of those things. Choir was pretty much the most I could handle on my work schedule. And so if I could go back and do it again, I think that being in those performances and joining those, taking those opportunities is so much more important. And then I would say maintain that. And that means as a teacher, you should be taking your voice lessons. You should be taking piano lessons. You need to maintain your instrument. And your instrument is yourself, especially if you're a choral educator.
I do really appreciate, Brianna, that you took time out to speak with me. I've loved seeing how you've grown as a person and as an educator since when I first met you all those years ago. I'm really proud of you and the work that you're doing. So keep it up. And thank you for joining me on Talking Backstage.
Thank you for having me. People don't look at our job as terribly glamorous. And I think that once you decide it's what you want to do, the love of it kind of takes over all of the other more challenging parts. And the joy of making music happen for the first time, when you see that spark, you can never get that again. There's no other way than the first time that a kid realizes hey, I'm making music. And I think that that's a high that you can chase for your entire career. And it's worth every second. I'll talk about school all day. It's my greatest love.
Thanks for tuning in to Talking Backstage. To watch other episodes, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, I'm your host, Tom Lund. I'll see you backstage.